I still remember the exact shade of blue in the sky that morning as I walked into the office. It was the kind of perfect spring day that makes you believe everything is possible. 5 years I'd spent building the marketing department at Meridian, tech from nothing into something remarkable. We'd gone from a scrappy startup with zero brand recognition to an industry contender, and I'd led that transformation with an almost religious dedication. My desk was positioned with a view of Lake Michigan, a small reward I'd negotiated instead of a higher salary when budgets were tight. I loved starting my day watching the water change colors with the rising sun. That morning I noticed Rachel, from HR, hovering near my office door, clutching a manila folder and avoiding eye contact. "Morning, Rachel. Everything okay?" I asked, setting down my coffee. She glanced nervously down the hallway. "Daniel wants to see you in the conference room. Now if possible." Daniel was our CEO. We'd started as colleagues when the company was just 12 people in a renovated warehouse. Back then, we'd stay late drinking beer from the mini fridge, strategizing about how we'd disrupt the industry. Something in Rachel's expression made my stomach tighten. The conference room was oddly full for 8:30 a.m. Daniel sat at the head of the table next to a woman I'd never seen before. The executive team lined one side, all wearing the same carefully blank expression. The empty chair facing them might as well have had my name on it. "Thanks for joining us, Ellie," Daniel said without standing. "This is Vanessa Carter. She's joining our team today as Chief Marketing Officer." I felt a cold wave wash through me. There was no CMO position in our organizational chart. My title was Marketing Director, the top marketing position in the company. "I'm sorry, I don't understand," I managed to say, my voice steadier than I felt. Daniel looked not at me, but at some point just over my shoulder. "As we scale, we need leadership with experience at larger organizations. Vanessa comes to us from Horizon Digital. Horizon Digital, our biggest competitor. The one whose market share we'd been steadily eating into over the past 2 years, thanks to campaigns I had personally overseen. Your team will now report to Vanessa," Daniel continued. "We'd like you to stay on as Senior Director to ensure a smooth transition." Stay on. A demotion disguised as a courtesy. The room suddenly felt airless. I just had my performance review 3 weeks ago. Daniel had called my work transformative and hinted at equity options in the next quarter. Now I was being sidelined in front of the entire executive team. "Was there a problem with my performance?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice even. "Not at all. This is purely strategic." I noticed Vanessa studying me with the detached curiosity of someone watching an animal at the zoo. My team didn't know yet. My team that had worked nights and weekends, that believed in what we were building as much as I did. I sat through the rest of the meeting in a fog. They discussed transition plans as if I'd already agreed to this new arrangement. As if this was a promotion rather than an erasure. When it finally ended, people filtered out quickly, avoiding eye contact. Only Thomas, our CTO, gave me a brief, apologetic glance. Daniel caught me as I was leaving. "Ellie, I hope you understand. The board feels—" "How long?" I interrupted. "How long have you been planning this?" He hesitated just long enough. 3 months, at least. While I'd been pulling all-nighters finalizing our new product launch, they'd been interviewing my replacement. "I thought we were friends," I said quietly. His expression hardened. "This is business, not friendship. I need to do what's best for the company." I walked back to my office and closed the door. Through the glass wall, I could see my team arriving, settling in for a day they didn't yet know would change everything. My hands trembled slightly as I touched the awards we'd won together, lined up neatly on my credenza. I had 45 minutes before the department-wide meeting where my demotion would be announced. 45 minutes to decide whether to stay and be humiliated or leave and be forgotten. Neither option felt possible, but I knew that whatever I decided would define not just my career, but who I was when everything I'd built was suddenly taken away. I didn't stay for the announcement. Instead, I wrote a brief email to my team explaining that I was taking a personal day and would be in touch soon. Then I walked out of the building I'd helped transform, past the lobby mural I'd commissioned. From a local artist, Under the sleek new logo I'd personally selected after weeks of deliberation, the Chicago wind hit me like a slap and I welcomed it. My feet carried me automatically toward the lake, where I sat on a cold bench watching waves crash against the concrete barrier. My phone vibrated constantly in my pocket. Messages from confused team members, calendar invites to transition meetings, a particularly tone-deaf email from HR about embracing change. By afternoon, social media told the story. Vanessa's appointment was being celebrated across LinkedIn. Comments praised Meridian for the strategic hire and forward-thinking leadership. Daniel had given an interview to a tech blog describing how bringing in Vanessa represented the company's evolution from startup to industry leader. No mention of me, no acknowledgement of what we'd built. 5 years of my life, reduced to a footnote in someone else's success story. I shut off my phone and went home to my apartment in Wicker Park. The space felt foreign somehow, as if it belonged to a different version of me, the version who left each morning with purpose, who had an identity beyond the sudden hollow emptiness in my chest. Sleep didn't come that night. Instead, I scrolled through job listings until the words blurred together, drafted and deleted resignation emails, and tried to imagine explaining to my parents who'd been so proud of my career that I'd been effectively replaced. Morning brought resolution in the form of fury. I showered, put on my most expensive suit, and returned to Meridian. The receptionist's eyes widened when I walked in. Clearly, everyone knew. My office door was closed, but not locked. Inside, Vanessa sat at my desk surrounded by my awards, rearranging my furniture. A box of my personal items sat by the door. "Ellie," she said, not bothering to stand, "I was told you'd taken some time off." "I'm here to speak with my team," I replied, voice steady despite the rage coursing through me. "Your former team," she corrected with a practiced smile. "Daniel thought it might be best if you handled the transition remotely, less disruptive." Of course he did. They wanted me gone, erased, forgotten. "These people have worked with me for years," I said. "I at least owe them a goodbye. I've already met with them this morning. They're excited about our new direction." The lie hung between us. I knew my team. They'd be confused, angry, worried about their own positions. But they'd also be professional, nodding politely while this stranger outlined her vision for work they'd poured their hearts into. "You won't last 6 months," I said quietly. Her smile tightened. "That's not very collaborative of you." "It's not a threat. It's a prediction. You don't know what you've walked into." "I know exactly what I've walked into," she replied, standing now. "A department that needs professional leadership and strategic direction. Daniel has been very transparent about the challenges." Something clicked. "You and Daniel knew each other before, didn't you?" The slight flush on her cheeks told me everything. This wasn't just business. This was personal, though not in the way I'd initially thought. I picked up the box by the door. "I'll need my files." "Company property, I'm afraid. But HR has your personal contacts. They'll be emailed to you." I stood there, holding a box containing 5 years reduced to coffee mugs and framed photos. Through the glass wall, I could see my team watching, their expressions ranging from sympathy to discomfort. "I built this department," I said, not quite able to let go. "And now I'll take it where it needs to go." She turned back to her computer, a clear dismissal. I walked through the marketing department one last time. Some people nodded silently. Others suddenly became fascinated with their screens. Only Zoe, a graphic designer I'd hired straight out of college, stood up. "This is wrong," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. I shook my head slightly. "Don't burn bridges for me." "It's business," I echoed Daniel's words, though they tasted bitter. "Take care of each other." The elevator doors closed on my career at Meridian. By the time I reached the lobby, my company badge no longer worked at the security gate. I had to be buzzed out like a visitor. Outside, I called the one person who would understand, James, my former mentor who now ran a boutique agency across town. "Can I buy you lunch?" I asked when he picked up. "Ellie?" Shouldn't you be orchestrating Meridian's world domination? That's exactly what we need to talk about. James listened without interrupting as I unloaded the story over plates of pasta at a dimly lit Italian restaurant in the West Loop. When I finished, he leaned back and studied me with the same piercing gaze that had intimidated me when I was his assistant years ago. "So what are you going to do about it?" he asked finally. "Do? What can I do? They've made their decision." "That's not what I asked." He twirled spaghetti around his fork deliberately. "You have 3 options. 1, take the demotion and be miserable. 2, find another corporate job and start over. 3, do something that scares the hell out of you." "I'm not exactly feeling brave right now," I admitted. That's precisely when bravery matters. His agency, Catalyst, had started in his garage after he'd been forced out of an executive position at a major firm. I'd watched him build it from nothing into something remarkable. "When was the last time you weren't someone's employee?" The question hung between us. I'd gone straight from college to entry-level marketing, then climbed steadily through increasingly prestigious companies. My identity was so wrapped up in my corporate titles that I'd never considered an alternative. "You think I should start my own agency? In this economy? With no clients?" James shrugged. "I think you should stop seeing yourself through their eyes." That night, I created a spreadsheet with brutal honesty. Savings that would last 5 months if I was careful. A network of industry contacts, many of whom had already sent sympathetic messages. Skills that were valuable but not unique in a crowded marketplace. For 3 weeks, I applied to senior marketing positions at companies similar to Meridian. I had second-round interviews that went nowhere. One hiring manager even mentioned they'd heard, through the grapevine, that I was difficult to work with. Daniel's revenge for my refusal to stay on in a diminished role. Meanwhile, Meridian announced a complete rebranding under Vanessa's leadership, erasing the visual identity I'd cultivated. Worse, 4 members of my former team were restructured out of their jobs, replaced by people from Vanessa's previous company. When Zoe called me in tears after being let go, something hardened inside me. That evening I bought a domain name, Watershed Marketing. The next morning I filed LLC paperwork. By afternoon I was sketching a logo at my kitchen table, energized, for the first time since walking out of Meridian. But energy doesn't pay bills. The reality of entrepreneurship hit like a freight train. No guaranteed paycheck. No team. No office with a view of the lake. Just me, my laptop, and dwindling savings. The first potential client, a restaurant group looking for help with their social media, chose a larger agency because they worried about my bandwidth. The second wanted my ideas but balked at my rates, suggesting I should be building my portfolio. The third simply ghosted after 2 promising meetings. 4 months in, sitting alone in my apartment-turned-office, I stared at my bank account and faced the possibility that James had been wrong. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. Maybe my success at Meridian had been circumstantial, not earned. My phone pinged with a LinkedIn notification. Meridian had been nominated for a major industry award for a campaign I'd initiated before my departure. I closed my laptop and walked to the lake. The Chicago skyline gleamed in the distance, thousands of windows lit by people with purpose, with belonging. I felt untethered, a balloon drifting away from everything familiar. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Is this Ellie Montgomery?" A woman's voice, unfamiliar. Speaking. "This is Caroline Wu from Thrive Health Tech. We met at the Digital Innovation Conference last year. I heard you've gone independent." I remembered her, sharp, insightful, asking the most challenging questions during my presentation. "That's right," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "We're launching a new patient portal and our marketing team is swamped. Our agency of record wants 6 months to develop a campaign. We don't have 6 months." "What's your timeline?" 8 weeks, it's impossible, which is why I'm calling you." Standing there at the lake's edge, watching the water shift and change, I recognized the moment for what it was. Not salvation, but an opportunity to remember who I was before Meridian became my identity. "Impossible is familiar territory," I said. "Let's meet tomorrow." When I hung up, I didn't feel elated, I felt clear-headed. This wouldn't be easy. One potential client didn't solve everything. The path ahead remained uncertain. But as I walked home through streets I'd traveled hundreds of times, I saw my city differently. Not as the backdrop to my former success, but as a landscape of possibility. Every storefront, every startup, every established business contained problems I might solve, stories I might help tell. For the first time since Daniel's betrayal, I felt something like hope. Not because circumstances had changed, but because I finally understood. What Meridian had taken from me was a job, a title, an office. What they couldn't take was what really mattered: my expertise, my resilience, and most importantly, my capacity to begin again. My meeting with Caroline the next day wasn't what I expected. Instead of the typical corporate conference room, she suggested the Chicago Botanic Garden. We walked the paths surrounding the Japanese garden while she outlined Thrive Health Tech's challenges. Our patient portal needs to feel accessible to everyone from tech-savvy millennials to seniors who still print their emails, she explained. Our current agency keeps pitching concepts that feel sterile, clinical. Healthcare is emotional, personal. I listened more than I spoke, taking mental notes as Caroline described their vision. Unlike my presentations at Meridian, where I'd arrive with polished decks and rehearsed pitches, this felt raw, authentic. Just two people trying to solve a problem together. Why me? I finally asked as we sat on a bench overlooking the water. There are dozens of established agencies in Chicago. Caroline smiled. I followed your work at Meridian, the Technology with Heart campaign. That was yours, wasn't it? I nodded, surprised she remembered. That's why. You understand that technology isn't about features, it's about how it makes people feel. She paused. Also, I heard what happened. How they treated you wasn't right. The validation from a stranger felt unexpectedly powerful. Someone had noticed. Someone had seen value in my work beyond Meridian's walls. I should be transparent, I said. Watershed is just me right now. I don't have a team. Good, Caroline replied. That means no bureaucracy. No layers of account managers diluting the creative process. She handed me a folder. Here's everything we have so far. Our budget, timeline, research. If you want this project, it's yours. That evening, I spread Caroline's documents across my dining table and began working with an intensity I hadn't felt in months. By midnight, I had the skeleton of a strategy. By dawn, a creative brief that made my heart race with possibility. 3 days later, I presented my concept to Caroline and Thrive's executive team. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled up my slides on their conference room screen, a stark reminder that I no longer had a marketing department behind me. This was all me. Healthcare technology doesn't need to look like healthcare technology, I began. It needs to feel like a conversation with someone who cares. My concept centered around real patients telling their stories through a documentary-style campaign. No actors, no scripted testimonials, just authentic experiences captured with dignity. When I finished, the room was quiet. The CMO, a man with decades of healthcare marketing experience, removed his glasses. This is risky, he said. Healthcare marketing traditionally emphasizes authority, expertise. My heart sank. But, he continued, traditional isn't working anymore. Let's try something human. I left with a signed contract and my first major client. The project would sustain me financially for months. More importantly, it gave me something I'd lost at Meridian: purpose. Word spread quickly in Chicago's tight-knit marketing community. By the time I delivered Thrive's campaign, on schedule and exceeding expectations, 3 more clients had reached out. A financial tech startup, a sustainable clothing brand, a family-owned restaurant group expanding into new neighborhoods. I couldn't handle all the work alone. I needed to expand, but the thought of becoming an employer terrified me. What if I failed them? What if I became like Daniel? The solution came unexpectedly. Zoe, my former designer from Meridian, called to congratulate me on the Thrive campaign. I saw the videos, she said. They're beautiful. So different from what Meridian is putting out now. I hesitated, then took a chance. How would you feel about freelancing on a project basis? I can't offer full-time yet, but yes, she interrupted. Absolutely yes. Zoe wasn't the only one. Within weeks, I'd assembled a network of freelancers, many former Meridian employees who'd been pushed out in Vanessa's restructuring. We worked remotely, gathering occasionally in coffee shops or my apartment. No hierarchy, no politics. Just talented people doing their best work without fear. 6 months after my humiliating exit from Meridian, Watershed Marketing was thriving. We'd moved from my apartment to a small but airy studio in Pilsen. Our client roster was growing. I was paying myself a modest but stable salary. Then came the email that changed everything again. The subject line read simply, "We should talk." The sender, Daniel Matthews, CEO, Meridian Tech. My finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity, or perhaps something more complicated, made me open it. "Ellie," it read, "I hear you're doing well. I'm not surprised. Things at Meridian have taken an unexpected turn. I'd appreciate the opportunity to meet. No agenda, just conversation." I stared at the screen, feeling the echo of that conference room ambush months ago. What could he possibly want? Revenge for poaching his former employees? To gloat about Meridian's success without me? Or perhaps most dangerously, to offer me a way back? I closed the laptop without responding and walked to the window of my new office. The Chicago skyline looked different from this angle, less imposing, more like a landscape I was now part of rather than beneath. I'd found my footing, built something with integrity. But part of me still wanted Daniel to see it, to know I'd survived, to understand what he'd thrown away. What's the worst that could happen? I asked my reflection in the window. I reopened the laptop and typed 2 words. When? Where? We met at a small coffee shop in Bucktown, far from the corporate downtown where we'd once shared ambitious dreams over expense account lunches. Daniel arrived 5 minutes late, uncharacteristically disheveled. The confident CEO I'd known had been replaced by someone who looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Thanks for coming," he said, settling into the chair across from me. I nodded, determined to give away nothing. "You said we should talk." He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup as if seeking warmth. Meridian is struggling. The rebrand didn't land. The last 2 product launches missed projections. Investors are asking questions. And this concerns me because you predicted it. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. "The day you left, you told Vanessa she wouldn't last 6 months. You were right. She resigned last week." A wave of vindication washed through me, immediately followed by unease. I hadn't wished for Meridian to fail. I'd loved that company, given it years of my life. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, meaning it. "No, you're not." A hint of the old Daniel, sharp, perceptive, emerged. "But you should be. Your stock options would have been worth something if we'd stayed on trajectory." I laughed, the sound surprisingly bitter even to my own ears. "Is that why you wanted to meet? To remind me what I lost when you pushed me out?" "I wanted to meet because Watershed is doing exceptional work." He pulled out his phone, scrolling to an article from a prominent marketing publication. My portrait was featured alongside a headline, "Ex-Meridian Marketing Director Redefines Healthcare Campaigns." "You've been watching me," I realized. "Of course I have. You were the best hire I ever made." The compliment landed like a slap. "Then why did you replace me?" Daniel's expression shifted, revealing something I'd never seen in him before. Shame. The board thought we needed someone with big agency experience to attract acquisition interest. I let them convince me that your approach was too boutique, too focused on connection rather than scale. "And you didn't think to discuss this with me?" I could have adjusted the strategy. "I handled it badly," he admitted. "I was a coward. It was easier to bring in someone new than to challenge someone I respected." "Respected," I repeated. Past tense noted. He winced. "I deserve that." We sat in silence. Through the coffee shop window, I watched people hurrying past, each carrying their own complicated stories. 8 months ago, this conversation would have meant everything. Validation, vindication, the chance to return triumphant to the corner office with the lake view. Now it felt like speaking to someone from a previous life. "What do you want from me, Daniel?" He took a deep breath. "Meridian needs you. We're losing clients. The team is demoralized. I'm asking if you'd consider coming back as CMO. Full creative, control, board seat, equity refresh." The offer hung between us. Everything I'd thought I wanted when I was first pushed out. And if I refuse? Then I'll probably be having this same conversation with someone else in 6 months. Except I'll be the ex-CEO explaining where it all went wrong. I studied him. This man who had once held such power over my career, my sense of worth. Now he needed me more than I needed him. "I have clients who trust me," I said. "People who left Meridian because of how they were treated. Bring them with you. We'll acquire Watershed, fold it into Meridian's structure but maintain its identity. You've built something valuable, Ellie. Something with integrity." The proposition was elegant. Watershed would gain resources, stability. I'd return to Meridian, not as a defeated former employee, but as a conqueror. The narrative would be completely rewritten. "I need time to think," I said. Daniel nodded. "Take all the time you need." He stood to leave, then hesitated. "For what it's worth, watching you build Watershed from nothing. It's been impressive. You're better than I ever gave you credit for." After he left, I remained at the table, turning the offer over in my mind. The practical benefits were undeniable. Financial security, corporate resources, the satisfaction of returning to the company that had discarded me, this time with power. Yet something didn't sit right. I pulled out my phone and texted James. "Need advice? Drinks tonight?" Hours later, at a quiet bar in Logan Square, I laid out Daniel's proposal. James listened with the same intensity he'd shown when I first told him about being pushed out. "It's a good offer," he acknowledged. "Smart business move for everyone involved." "But," I prompted, hearing the reservation in his voice, "but you're asking the wrong question." He leaned forward. "You're asking whether you should take this opportunity. You should be asking what kind of life you want to build." "What does that mean?" "It means Watershed isn't just a business to you. It's a statement about values, about how people deserve to be treated." He swirled the whiskey in his glass. "If you go back to Meridian, even with all the power they're offering, you're still operating within their system. The system that discarded you when it was convenient." "People can change," I argued. "Organizations can change." "Absolutely, but who's going to change who? Will you transform Meridian's culture? Or will their pressure to scale to maximize profit to please the board eventually transform you?" I had no answer. "Ask yourself this," James continued. "What would you tell Zoe if she got a call from Vanessa tomorrow offering her old job back with a promotion?" The question cut through my rationalizations. I knew exactly what I'd tell her. Run. I spent a week considering Daniel's offer, turning it over like a complex puzzle. During the day, I'd continue working with my Watershed clients, guiding campaigns with the personal attention that had become our signature. At night, I'd make lists of pros and cons, projections of what Watershed could become with Meridian's resources behind it. The morning I was supposed to give Daniel my answer, I called an impromptu meeting at our Pilsen studio. The core group, Zoe, and 4 other former Meridian employees who now regularly freelanced for Watershed, gathered around our makeshift conference table. "I have a situation," I began, explaining Daniel's offer without embellishment. "This affects all of you. I won't decide without your input." The reactions were immediate and varied. Maya, our copywriter, looked intrigued by the resources Meridian could provide. Tanvi, who'd been unceremoniously laid off during Vanessa's restructuring, folded her arms defensively. Zoe just watched me, her expression unreadable. "Would we still work the way we do now?" Tyler asked. Or would we be absorbed back into the corporate machine? Daniel promised creative independence, I said. But realistically, once we're part of Meridian again, there would be pressure to conform to their systems, their priorities. Their priorities being quarterly profits, not quality work, Tanvi muttered. That's not entirely fair, I countered, surprising myself by defending the company that had cast me aside. Meridian built innovative products. They just lost their way on how to connect those products to real people. The conversation continued. For hours. Arguments formed on both sides. The stability of corporate backing versus the freedom of independence. The resources of an established company versus the agility of our boutique operation. Throughout it all, Zoe remained quiet, observing. Finally, as the debate circled back on itself, she spoke. Can I show you all something? She opened her laptop and pulled up a client email we'd received that morning. Feedback on a campaign we'd created for the sustainable clothing brand. The client had forwarded a message from a customer, a woman who'd been moved to tears by the authenticity of the campaign's message. For the first time, the customer wrote, I didn't feel like I was being sold to. I felt like I was being spoken with. This is what we do now, Zoe said simply. We make work that matters to actual humans, not just shareholders. Can we honestly say we'd still do this at Meridian? Her question hung in the air, crystallizing the choice before us. Not just a business decision, but a philosophical one about the kind of work we wanted to create and the lives we wanted to lead. I met with Daniel that afternoon at Meridian's headquarters. The familiar lobby, with its sleek lines and digital displays, felt like revisiting a childhood home, recognizable but no longer yours. Before you give me your answer, Daniel said as we settled into his office, there's something you should know. The board is considering acquisition offers. If the right one comes along, everything could change again. New leadership, new direction. And you're just telling me this now? He sighed. I'm telling you because despite everything, I consider you a friend. If Watershed becomes part of Meridian, you'd be subject to whatever changes come with acquisition. The revelation should have made my decision easier. Instead, it complicated it further. If Meridian was acquired, the stability they offered might vanish overnight. Or conversely, it could mean even greater opportunities under new ownership. What would you do? I asked. If you were me? Daniel leaned back in his chair, gazing out at the Chicago skyline. 5 years ago, I would have said take the deal. Climb the ladder, chase the title. He turned back to me. But now, after watching what this industry does to people, after seeing what you've built on your own terms, he shook his head. I don't know anymore. His uncertainty was oddly reassuring. The Daniel I'd known at Meridian would never have admitted to not knowing anything. I can't accept your offer, I said finally. Watershed needs to remain independent. Instead of disappointment, I saw something like respect cross his face. I figured, worth a shot though. But, I continued, I might be open to a different arrangement, a strategic partnership rather than an acquisition. Watershed maintains its independence, but we contract with Meridian on specific projects where our approach could add value. Keeping your distance, he observed. Maintaining our identity, I corrected. You get access to our creative perspective. We get access to larger projects. Everyone benefits without compromising who they are. Daniel considered this. The board wanted an acquisition, something they could announce to boost investor confidence. They wanted a quick fix. I'm offering something sustainable. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Always the strategist. We spent the next hour outlining what this partnership might look like. No guarantees, but possibilities that honored the strengths of both companies without erasing what made Watershed special. As I left Meridian that day, I felt none of the bitterness that had accompanied my previous exit. Only clarity. Whatever happened with this partnership, whether it flourished or faded, I had made the decision on my own terms. 6 months later, Watershed had doubled in size. We'd moved to a proper office in the West Loop, hired 5 full-time employees, and established structured relationships with dozens of freelancers. Our partnership with Meridian had evolved into a successful collaboration on 2 major projects, with more in discussion. The morning of our 1-year anniversary, I arrived early to find someone had decorated the office with balloons and a banner reading, "Watershed Year 1. On my desk sat a bottle of champagne with a note, "To Making Waves, Jay." I smiled, recognizing James's handwriting. Looking around at the space we'd created, bright, open, alive with possibility, I felt a profound gratitude for that moment of betrayal that had set everything in motion. Daniel and I still met occasionally for coffee, not as former boss and employee, not as business partners, but as 2 people navigating the complicated landscape of careers, choices, and consequences. Meridian was eventually acquired as he'd predicted. He stepped down as CEO but remained on as an advisor, seeming more at peace with the reduced role than I would have imagined. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked during one of our meetings. "Not coming back to Meridian when you had the chance?" I considered the question, thinking about the financial security I'd declined, the corporate prestige I'd walked away from. Then I thought about the work we were doing at Watershed. Meaningful, human, true to the values I'd always believed in but hadn't always been able to prioritize. "No," I answered honestly. "I don't regret it at all." What I didn't say, what I didn't need to say, was that sometimes the worst day of your professional life, the day you're betrayed, undermined, cast aside, can actually be the first day of a better story. Not because the pain wasn't real, but because it forces you to decide who you really are when everything external is stripped away. In losing Meridian, I'd found something more valuable: the courage to build a life that reflected my deepest values, not someone else's definition of success. And that, as it turned out, was worth every difficult moment along the way.